How are you guys doing? Today is Tuesday, March 16th, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an individual profile on Vladimir Guerrero Jr., the elite young first baseman for the Toronto Blue Jays, who today turns 22 years old. And I think that as the years go by and as his career adds up, there's going to be more and more to add to his legacy as time goes on. And with that said, I still think he has some accomplishments and accolades that I think if I go through, it should justify my reasoning for having Vladimir Guerrero as one of the elite players that I believe stand out in the MLB right now. So if you're unfamiliar with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., or at least if you're unfamiliar with the name, his dad is Vladimir Guerrero Sr., of course, one of the greatest MLB players to ever play the game. I caught him towards the end of his career when he was playing for the Angels, one of the best home run hitters I've ever seen. And now his son he came up in Canada, and he's one of the best prospects, or he was one of the best prospects in baseball, and now he's one of the youngest players in the MLB playing right now, and he has a good amount of experience despite how young he is. So he would eventually get drafted, or he would eventually get signed as an international prospect into the Toronto Blue Jays system. And then while playing, he would get eventually called up to the Toronto Blue Jays in 2019. But first in 2017, he was all the way back in 2017 when he was about 18 years old. He was the number 4 prospect in all of baseball, which is virtually unheard of. If a teenager is a top prospect in baseball, then they're going to be incredibly good. And then his second year, when he was 19, he was named the number 1 prospect in all baseball. So of course, all of baseball was ready to watch him once he made his jump to the pros. And they knew it was going to take time, but once the majority of the players in the MLB were roughly his age, he was going to dominate. So this would transition into his very short career in the MLB. So starting with his rookie season, he would actually get a start about a month or two into the season, and most teams do this for their younger players just so they have an extra year of control over their contract. And in his age 20 season in the MLB in 2019, he would play 123 games in a season where the Toronto Blue Jays would finish with a 67-95 record, which would be the 4th best record in the AL East. Of course, they did not qualify for the playoffs that year. But in that season, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. would end up with 126 hits in those 123 games, which I think is a great sign of success that he has more hits than games played. He had 52 runs in those 123 games, 15 home runs, 69 RBIs, 272 batting average, a 772 on base plus slugging. He would finish 6th in the Rookie of the Year voting, but he would still put up an incredible season despite the fact that he was 20 years old. And after the season, he would establish himself as a player that many would keep their eyes on, and a player that is going to continue to get better and better as this league continues to grow. So this would transition to his 2020 season, and just to give a bit of background, of course, in 2020, all sports were put on hold because of the coronavirus, and because it took place right at the beginning of the year, right before baseball was scheduled to start. They had to shorten the season to about 60 games and started towards the middle of the summer. So they had to shorten the 162 games to about 60 games. So in 2020, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. would actually play all 60 games for the Toronto Blue Jays in a season where they would actually go 32-28 and finish with the 3rd best record in the AL East. They would actually qualify for the worst record in the American League, but they still went on to make the playoffs. In those 60 games, he would finish with 58 hits, less hits than games, but only by 2. He finished with 34 runs in those 60 games, 9 home runs, 33 RBIs, 262 batting average, a 791 OPS. nothing really crazy that jumps off the charts, but the fact that he played all 60 games and he played pretty consistently, despite the fact that he was playing in the Buffalo Stadium because the Toronto Stadium was locked off due to COVID. I think the fact that adjusting to a completely new stadium and the fact that he was 21 playing amongst a majority of players where the average age in the MLB is probably about 4 or 5 years older than he is. I think that's a really big accomplishment, and I think he's only getting better. And I think once the players that are his age that he's better than are starting to make up most of the MLB, then we'll start to see how much better he is. But with that said, I think Vladimir Guerrero Jr., he hasn't necessarily shown an elite start to the MLB, but I think there's a lot more to grow from considering he's incredibly young. But with that said, I want to thank everyone for listening to all just 6-7 minutes of this piece. Once again, today is Tuesday, March 16th, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I want to wish Vladimir Guerrero Jr. a happy 22nd birthday. I know his career is going to get better. And if you ever get a chance to watch Vladdy Jr., he's wearing number 27 for the Toronto Blue Jays. Right now, he's rocking first base. I think there'll be a time they'll probably settle him in at third base. But right now, he's rocking first. And once baseball starts, I definitely think that Vladdy Guerrero Jr. is going to be a player to keep your eye on. But with that said, I want to thank you once again for listening to this piece. I hope all is well, and peace out. I'll catch you with more pieces and profiles following this.